This is the Roland Juno-X polyphonic programmable synthesizer. Came out roughly a year ago. I've had it in the studio for a few months now, and I want to give some thoughts, some pros and cons, also from the perspective of someone that has not owned a vintage Juno before. So let's get right to it. So obviously, if you're looking for Juno sounds in a modern format, this is an excellent option. If you are looking for a vintage Juno, I don't think anything is going to stop you until you actually get a vintage Juno. Just want to throw that out there. If you are looking for this modern approach, this is actually a really great synthesizer. It's the evolution of the Juno line from Roland, or what they're calling the evolution of it. And it has this Juno-X model and also the Juno 106 and the Juno 60. The Juno-X and the 60 are technically what's unique to this board, whereas if you get the Jupiter-X, you get a 106 model, I believe. You don't get the Juno-X or the Juno 60 model. What you don't get though in the Juno-X is you don't get a Jupiter model and you don't get the SH101 model. A bit of a bummer. You have to buy those in the cloud, and then you have to grab a thumbstick and transfer them over, and you have to deal with licensing, you have to own a license. I don't know. The Roland Cloud thing, it's very, in my perspective, but I obviously really like the synthesizers. In fact, I have a Phantom 08 in the back right there, which I've really been enjoying. Back to the Juno. It is an excellent synthesizer. That is obvious, and it has the Juno style, which means that the panel is very straightforward to program. One of the cornerstones of the Juno experience is that you have a whole bunch of sweet spots for any kind of program that you might do for your sounds. It just sounds really good, and that's why it's so prolific in a lot of records, because it has an excellent sounding vibe and very easy to program. The Keybed in this synth is also excellent. It feels fantastic. Also high resolution faders as well. That makes a big difference for the feeling of a virtual analog synth. And by the way, if you don't know, this is all digital. There's no analog circuitry that is a reference to the original Juno. It's all digital, built-in software type of stuff, which has its pros and cons. The polyphony is significantly higher than the original Junos, but some would say that it misses some character or vibe. Again, I'm not going to detail whether or not this is a direct comparison to a vintage Juno. So the Keybed feels really fantastic. There's this nice performance center right here that has your modulation, pitch bend type of stuff. It's very Roland right there. You got two faders that are assignable, SL1, SL2. And you have three switches that are assignable as well, plus your transpose, octave keys, and all that. A lot of the times attack and release are set to these sliders right here, which you can hear right now. Of all the keyboards that we have in the studio, I actually really like this Keybed. I think it feels fantastic. Again, I'm singing a lot of praise for the Keybed, and I think it's warranted. It feels really good. In terms of the layout of how things are organized, this is one of these things where it's confusing initially. Once you get it, it's obvious. I recently did a review on the SH4D, and it has basically the same software. In the SH4D, you have patterns and then parts, and then each part can have a particular model and all that. In this, it's scenes and parts and models. And scenes can have global features saved that then go to individual parts, and each part can be one of these models, like a Juno-X, 106, 60, or XV5080, the piano, or load up a SH101 or Jupiter 8. A lot of flexibility, almost to the point where it gets confusing, actually, or you can begin to forget certain things with the amount of flexibility that's in this synth, even though it appears to be very simple. I think that's one of the things. It sits on both of these sides of it's a very simple looking synthesizer with too much capability at times. Not to say that's a bad thing, because obviously more features are really nice. When it comes to programming other types of synths, like if you do the Zen core type of stuff, the panel isn't very useful. You're kind of relegated to this LCD screen. That being said, I wouldn't buy a Juno-X to tweak Zen core sounds. You buy a Juno-X because you want Juno sounds and you want the Juno panel to perform with, and it does that very well. Real quick, if you're enjoying this content and want to help out beyond a like and subscribe, then consider using our affiliate links. Our affiliate of choice is Zounds, and if you use our affiliate links through them, we greatly appreciate it. So thank you very much. Oh yeah, I was saying like the sliders have high resolution. Not all of them have high resolution. For instance, like the sub level goes from 0 to 255, whereas the frequency goes from 0 to 1000, over 1000. It says 1022, but I think it's supposed to go up to 1023. So maybe my slider is a little janky. The things that count, or the things that matter, have really high resolution, like this. Attack has high resolution. In fact, all the ADSR. Depth goes up to 1000, and below 1,000. So this one's very high resolution, like 2,000 or so. But the idea behind it is that there is a lot of resolution on the digital side to emulate what an analog circuitry would actually be. So that's good. That's where it counts. Feels good. Being that it's 4-part multi-timbral, you get a lot of complex sounds and possibilities out of it. And you also have a rhythm section as well. It makes it start to feel like a bit more of a workstation, but I also don't feel like it's as useful in that sense. It's useful in the sense of needing a instant band to kind of practice with, to play keys with. I don't think it's as useful in this context of a studio. You might completely disagree with that, and that's totally fine. In fact, drop comments below if you do think it is very useful in the context of the studio. In my opinion, the whole rhythm part, arpeggio, it's kind of hit or miss. I actually prefer just a regular traditional arpeggiator in my experience. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop them below. Back to navigating this stuff. If you're in scene, you have these broad scenes that control all 4 parts plus rhythm, and also the effects and everything. Softy. So I'm in scene. If I press part, I see how this scene is built. You can see delay, reverb, chorus is on. You can see the multi-effects for the particular part. And the multi-effects is dedicated to each individual part. Like the Juno chorus stuff, that gets switched over to the multi-effects. So if I press this, part 1 now gets Juno 2, or the Juno chorus with the style 2 pushed in. And over here, it's telling which parts are on. So it says part 1 and 2 are on, part 3 and 4 and rhythm are off. So I can turn off part 2. Now I'm just hearing part 1 with this Juno chorus. Or turn it off. I can also turn off the delay, reverb, chorus. Now we put the Juno chorus on. So what's interesting is the Juno chorus settings right here are basically just shortcuts to presets that are inside the multi-effects for the part. It's like 1 foot in the workstation, but 1 foot in the synth side. So there's a button dedicated to it on the panel so you can reach for it immediately because that's, you know, the Juno style chorus. But it's also just presets underneath the hood. So if I go menu and then go down to tone edit, you will see multi-effects tone MFX. That means I think there's 90 plus in there. And there's great ones as well. Like the lo-fi compressor, that's my favorite. Now this is the lo-fi compressor. Sounds delicious. And then turn on delay, reverb, chorus. So one thing you could do, if you still want that Juno chorus sound, is you can actually crank the chorus send, and then if you hold shift, rotate chorus, you'll get some effects for the scene here. I believe you can page through to the chorus. Right now the chorus type is SDD320. I'm going to switch it to Juno chorus right here. Now, I have not found anything in the manual that says whether or not that Juno chorus is the same as the Juno chorus in the tone multi-effects part. It's unclear. I'm assuming it is. It seems like it would obviously be the same Juno chorus, but if it is, you can have double Juno choruses at the same time. I don't want to confuse the situation here. But we're on Juno chorus, we'll go version 2. Noise level we will drop. This is scene level chorus. Sorry, I should have explained that actually. What these are, these delay, reverb, chorus, this is scene level. It affects part 1, 2, 3, 4, and rhythm. Your chorus on the scene level can be different from the Juno chorus that you have on the individual parts. I have that lo-fi compressor hitting tone 1 and then sending to the chorus. What I'm trying to show here is that there is a lot of flexibility. If you just treat this as a single tone or a single part with all these effects, you have delay, reverb, chorus, plus a drive, and then your tone multi-effects for the individual model that you load up. So huge flexibility right here. Kind of have to keep a mental map of how all this stuff is organized in order to juggle it in the moment. So if you're in the part mode of the keyboard, you hold shift and you go MFX, it'll automatically bring you to there. So there's a lot of like shortcuts like that to be able to get you into the deep dive menu. So each tone has access to a ton of effects in the multi-effect stuff. This is the same thing as the SH4D, same thing as the Juno-X. Again, the software is shared across all these devices. They're not exact, there's differences, but there's a lot of sharing of this like Zen core technology, which I think is cool. I don't mind that at all, actually. By the way, in this video, I'm not gonna be talking about the rhythm part because it's basically a bunch of kits that are loaded up and then you can record like a drum pattern type of thing with like the step sequencer. I am not interested in that for the synth. If you are looking for something like that, go check out some other videos. I'm sure lots of people have covered it. I wanna just focus on the synthesizer stuff and the usefulness of it in the studio. Which, speaking of, there's some advanced type of stuff that you can do when hooked up to a computer. You have to have a custom driver, by the way. So if you download the custom driver and you plug in USB, you have to go to, let me go menu, let's see, system, USB driver right here. It starts with generic, and that way you can actually plug it into, say, like a MPC and get the MIDI to go back and forth. But if you want the audio, you have to go vendor. You select vendor, shift right to save the settings in there. Then in the computer, it'll recognize it both as a MIDI and audio interface, which is great because then you could have all 4 parts plus the rhythm all go out stereo channels in your DAW if you select it as your audio interface. While I do think that's useful, I personally haven't used it, mainly because I have a Mo2 interface with a bunch of inputs, and I prefer to have all my stuff going through the analog converters just because that's how my monitoring is set up right now. But what it is missing is the ability to hook it up to things like an iOS device. Because you have to have a custom driver installed to be able to use that, you miss out on a lot of features. Like, for instance, if this was a generic driver for the audio side, you could technically plug it into an MPC. I have an MPC off to my side, that's why I'm pointing at it. You could then set the MPC to the audio driver of the Juno-X and then record all 4 parts into separate audio tracks in an MPC and capture them that way. That would be awesome. You cannot do that in its current state because you have to have custom vendor drivers loaded up for the audio side of things. Bit unfortunate, honestly. Luckily, you can still use the generic USB MIDI driver, but essentially this doubles as an audio interface. You even have a mic input for the vocoder, so you could use that as inputs into your DAW. But like I said, in terms of a studio, something that's already set up, those features aren't as useful because you already have an interface all pre-set up to do what you want to do already. Now, if you're in the market for a synthesizer and it's one of your first synthesizers and you're looking for something that is relatively complex or something that's going to be able to do a lot of synthesis and sound design, I don't think the Juno-X is the choice. It's relatively simple. It's built to be something that is very straightforward, your controls, your panels, and you can get deeper into some crazy stuff, but it's not intuitive with this whole menu system. In my opinion, this is more of like a simplistic synthesizer with a deep underhood or under engine, whatever you want to call it. If you wanted something that was more complex, say like the Hydra synth, you're not going to get that level of detail inside something like the Juno. It's just not made for that. If you want complex synthesis, you definitely have to look elsewhere, in my opinion. Again, you can load up different models, and there could be some other future models that are complex that get loaded into a Juno or a Jupiter-X or something like that. But the panel is not going to reflect in an intuitive way how to really handle lots of modulation and lots of routing possibilities, like something of the Hydra synth. I would stay away from this if you're looking for a deep sound design experience. Something else that this has that other modern synthesizers typically don't have is speakers. Now, when I first saw that it had speakers, I was like, oh, that's cool. Coming from the MPC Live 2, those speakers are actually pretty great. They are not studio mixing quality by any means, but they have enough low end to get the idea across of what the beat feels like. The speakers on the Juno-X, on the other hand, are not great. And I saw a lot of comments, people just saying, oh, they're bad. And I was like, well, they can't be that bad. And they're pretty bad. Let me give you some context. The reason why is the bass is heavily rolled off. It feels like a 300, 400 hertz roll off on the bass. So it makes it just not good. Like, your laptop probably has better speakers than what the Juno-X has. Now, what it does do though, is it gives resonance and feeling in the keys of when you're playing it. And that is one of the things that the designers actually wanted, was the feeling of it being an actual instrument. So if you have the speakers cranked up and you're playing, you do get this vibration in the keys. And then obviously you'd want it going through a keyboard amp or something like that. You want it through the PA system to be able to hear it in that context, because you're not going to use the speakers for performance. It's not it. And you're not going to use them for legitimate monitoring of stuff that's coming from your DAW. They're really just to give the feeling of the sound vibrating through the keyboards. So if you want that, you got it. great. Or if you just need to check if the thing is on or it can have sound, you can use the speakers as a quick like check to hear something. But beyond that, I don't think they're good. I think they're a bit of a waste. I saw a lot of people online saying they wish they would have just taken them out and not included them in the hardware because it probably cost money to put those speakers in there. I agree. This is what it is. I don't think the speakers are good. And again, coming from an MPC Live 2, those speakers are actually pretty great for being able to just get the ideas across and the feeling of the sound. I think to round things out, I'm gonna quickly talk about build quality. It feels really good, excellent build quality. It's relatively heavy, not super heavy, but it's got enough chunk to it to weigh down a stand. I would say if you are in the market for an excellent synthesizer for performance, for road-worthy gigging and stuff, I think this synth would actually hit the mark really well. If you've been using a vintage Juno and it crapped out or you're sick of repairing it and you need to use it for live performances, I think the Juno-X is like obviously the go-to. You got the interface in front of you to give you the Juno experience, but it has modern tools in it, or it's got modern architecture so it's not going to just suddenly die in the middle of performance, or not need really expensive repairs to replace internal electronics and all that. So I think as a performance keyboard for gigging, this would be an excellent choice if you need a synthesizer, and maybe you need a quick piano. It does have the piano in here. We go model RD piano. And it currently has the multi-effects. There we go, I had the chorus on there. You know, it's a piano. It's not the best piano. If you want something that is largely a synthesizer with synth controls, but if you need something to grab a quick piano, it does the job really well. I want to wrap it up here because I don't want to take too much time talking about all the details of the synthesizer. I just want to give some thoughts and experience as to using the Juno-X to maybe shed some light on whether or not you think it would be worthwhile for your studio or stage performance, or maybe you're building a new rig or something like that. It definitely has its places that I think fit really well. And again, if you're looking for a vintage Juno, nothing's probably going to scratch that itch until you get a vintage Juno. So I'm just going to leave that at that. Let me know what you think. Drop some comments below. Obviously, a like and subscribe helps out with the channel. And if you are picking up any gear, if you're going to pick up the Juno-X, if you use our affiliate links, then it greatly helps out the channel. Even if you pick up cables too, that definitely helps. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time for another one. Peace.